What's up guys, welcome to the Chess Giant. This is Solomon Riddell, and in today's video we're going to be covering one of the most aggressive and honestly enjoyable chess openings ever invented with the Nakhmanson Gambit. And this is really for you Scotch Gambit players, as we're going to start off with e4 and against e5 play knight f3 attacking that centralized pawn, and following the move knight c6 we're going to continue to fight for the center of the board with d4, really eyeing again that e5 pawn with some potential d5 ideas attacking that knight. So 9 times out of 10, maybe even 99 times out of 100, you're going to see black take that pawn, in which case we're not going to go into the Scotch game, but the Scotch Gambit, not taking the pawn, but really trying to activate our bishop and attack that very vulnerable pawn on f7. And honestly, the Scotch Gambit is an extremely dangerous opening. I mean, against lines like bishop e7, bishop c5, and bishop b4, there are a ton of opening traps. However, at the master and grandmaster level, Scotch Gambit players have had a really hard time facing the move knight f6. The whole idea is that this knight is attacking our pawn on e4, and if a move like e5 attacking the knight, they can just play d5 attacking our bishop. So in this position, many players don't like to push this pawn to e5. I thought I'd make this video for the Nakhmanson Gambit, in which we're not really going to care about the pawn on e4, but simply castle kingside. And now if knight takes e4 is played, which by the way is the best move for black, we're now going to play the crazy looking move knight c3. What on earth is going on? We just gave up 2 pawns. We're now giving up a piece, but I really do find that this is a dangerous chess opening for white. And in this video, we're going to cover the accepted lines with d takes c3 and knight takes c3. Let's first take a look at what happens if d takes c3 is played. I think most of you guys are probably going to run into d takes c3. I mean, it just seems logical, right? I mean, going a move back, you can take a knight with a knight, or you can take a knight with a pawn. I mean, why not just win a piece, right? But I actually think that this is a mistake from black. I mean, yes, guys, we're currently down 5 points of material, and at first sight, it may seem as if white is in big trouble. I mean, if we play a move like rook e1 trying to pin the knight, black can just play f5. And if we play a move like queen d5, black can just play knight d6, and it seems as if all is well for the black camp. But now again, we have another crazy move, a must move really, with bishop takes f7, attacking the king. And following king takes f7, yes guys, we are currently down 2 pieces and a pawn, but I absolutely love white's position here following the move queen d5. The Nakhmanson Gambit is not for the faint of heart. We are trying to checkmate the opponent's king, and in this particular situation, I mean, black could play a move like king e7 or king f6. I'm not really sure why anyone would do either of these, but in either case, we would simply take that knight on e4, and that king would get checkmated very quickly. What about the move king e8? This is probably what you're going to see most of the time. I recommend not taking with the queen, but instead playing rook e1. We want to get as many pieces involved as possible, and as y'all can tell, I mean, there's really nothing black can do from saving that knight on e4. In this position, we're going to be covering 3 key moves. The first one is d6. And I do want to mention that both d6 and bishop e7 are interchangeable. I mean, most of the time, you're probably going to see black play d6 and then bishop e7, or bishop e7 and then d6. So for the purposes of this video, we're just going to be covering d6 followed by bishop e7. We're then going to cover the moves h6 and queen h6. I mean, the move d6 really does make a lot of sense. Black is trying to get their back rank pieces into the game, specifically this light squared bishop on c8. And really the whole idea now is that after rook takes e4, black can play bishop e7, trying to shield the king. But really one of the main ideas, if not the main idea, of the Nakhmanson Gambit is to play bishop g5 and really try to pour on the pressure onto that minor piece. Really, no matter what black plays, let's say a move like c takes b2, which I do think is black's best option, we can now play rook ae1, forming a battery ram, attacking that minor piece along with our bishop on g5. And I think the best move here for black is probably just promoting to a queen in order to distract our rook on e1. But really the next move, no matter what black plays, again, we're going to bring our rook right back. We now have 2 rooks and a bishop all attacking that bishop on e7. And I mean, a move like rook f7 does seem to make a lot of sense, and I think this is probably what you're going to see in most of your games. I mean, how else do you defend this bishop than just by playing rook f8 and rook f7? But here we can now play bishop takes e7 with the idea And after knight takes e7, playing knight g5. Again, the key g5 square. We're now attacking this rook on f7 with both our queen and our knight. And if a move like rook f8, we have the very nice maneuver of queen b5 with the purpose of swinging our queen back to e2, in which case we now have a triple battery ram, all attacking that knight on e7, and white is simply winning this position. Now I do want to mention that rook f7 isn't the only option that black has. The best move is actually bishop f5, attacking our rook and trying to get this king some potential escape scores. However, against bishop f5, I personally really like the move bishop takes e7 with the idea of after knight takes e7 playing queen b5 with check and then capturing that knight on e7. I mean, here black really has no choice but to give up their queen, in which case we can now play queen takes b7, and following bishop d7, we now have knight d4. And really now, I mean, we're down a point in material, but there's no way for black to stop us from winning a pawn back. I mean, if rook a c8, we simply take the pawn on e7, and if rook f c8, we still win the pawn on c6 because this bishop can't take because it is pinned to the king, and the rook can't take because, well, we would simply win that rook on a8. There are some situations where I do think that two rooks is better than a queen and a pawn, but in a position like this where things are so open, we have a knight and the king on e7 is extremely vulnerable to attack. I would take white's position here every single time. So really there we covered both the moves d6 and bishop e7. In either case, we're going to take that knight on e4, play bishop g5, swing our rook to e1, and I absolutely love white's chances. What happens if black doesn't want us to bring a piece to g5 and plays h6? I mean, black may want to play h6, then bishop e7, d6, try to get some kind of momentum here. But now the problem with playing h6 is, yes, the g5 square is no longer available, but now the h5 square is available, and we actually have a forced mate in 7 with queen h5 check attacking the opponent's king, and following king e7, we're now going to take that knight with our rook. Now, I mean, if king d6, we're simply going to play bishop f4 with check, and that game is going to be over extremely quickly. If knight e5, well, thank you for the knight, and if king f6, we now have knight h4, really threatening mate in 1 in 2 different squares. And if the move knight e7 is played, trying to stop both, well, now, I mean, black just has a king on f6. We can play queen f3, forcing that knight to f5, and we have ourselves a game over at move 14 in this game. So h6 is definitely not the best option for black because we can simply swing our queen to h5, take that knight on e4, and white is going to checkmate the opponent's king easily within 15 moves. Now, what happens after the move queen f6? I actually do find that this is a very interesting option for black. I have seen this quite a few times at the master level. Against this, we're still going to take that knight on e4, and after bishop e7, play bishop g5 with tempo on the queen, in which case black can now play queen f7. Some of you guys may be wondering, why on earth did black play queen f6 and queen f7? Well, I do think that this queen on f7 is more actively placed than the queen on d8, which literally couldn't even move. And in this situation, we don't want to trade because we are down in material. We're down in material. We're trying to checkmate the opponent's king. Let's keep the attacking chances alive by playing queen d3. And again, if c takes b2, we have that same rook a e1 idea. And if the move d5 is played, I mean, obviously we can't just swing our rook because we would lose our rook on e4. But now we have a very interesting option with rook takes e7 check. Idea being, after knight takes e7, we can play rook e1, continuing to mount the pressure on that knight. And if a move like bishop e6 is played, we can play knight d4. And I really do like white's chances here. Both our rook and our knight are attacking the bishop on e6. Our bishop on g5 is attacking that knight on e7. We have queen b5 check ideas attacking both the king and the pawn on b7. And this is a really fun position to play with the white pieces. So y'all, we really just covered the move d takes c3, in which case we're going to play bishop takes f7 with check, followed by queen d5, rook e1, capture that knight right in the center of the board. That g5 square is always available, and you know the rest of the story. A very fun opening and very fun variation to play with as the white pieces. Now, what happens if black doesn't take with the pawn, but with the knight? I must admit, this is the much safer option for black, and against this, we're simply going to take that knight back with the b pawn. Now here, I mean, the best moves for black are d5 or bishop e7, and yet again, these are really interchangeable. You're probably going to see d5 and then bishop e7, or bishop e7 and then an eventual d5. So in today's video, we're going to be covering the move d5 in depth, but let's first cover what happens after d takes c3. I mean, this does seem like a good move, but it turns out that this is one of the many Nakhmanson Gambit traps. This turns out to be a huge mistake, in which case we can now play rook e1 check, and following bishop e7, play knight g5. Now, I must admit, many players will probably take that pawn on c3 because this position doesn't look all that intimidating. Black can castle kingside, or black can play the move d5. In either case, I mean, right now, black is ahead 3 points of material, but if we play this correctly, white is simply winning without a question. Let's first go over the move castling kingside. Again, black is up 3 points of material. If we take that pawn on f7, we're simply going to trade all the way down, and black is simply going to be way better. But there is one move here, and only one move, that keeps white in front with queen h5, really threatening a mate in one. And if h6 is played, we're simply now going to take back with our knight, and white is clearly winning that position. Following the move bishop takes g5, it may seem as if black has really extinguished all of white's attacking chances, and this is true in some respects, but now we can just play bishop takes g5. And no, we're not trying to checkmate this king anymore, but as y'all can see, this queen on d8 is simply trapped. There's no way for the queen to get out. e7 and f6 is covered, as well as the square on e8. This position is resignable for the black pieces, and a move like f6 can't be played because of our light squared bishop on c4, pinning it to the opponent's king. So castling kingside doesn't work because we simply have queen h5 threatening a mate in one, and if bishop takes g5 is played, getting rid of that threat, we simply take that bishop back and we win our opponent's queen. What about the move d5? I mean, this move, guys, may seem really out of the ordinary for you. It's both attacked by our bishop and our queen, but really the whole point here is that if we take with the queen, black could simply trade back, and they're still going to be ahead 2 points of material. And if we take back with the bishop, black can castle kingside ahead 2 points. This bishop is soon going to get into the game, and it actually turns out that black is completely okay there. So yet again, we have a key move. Just like against castling kingside, we have to play queen h5. Against the move d5, we're now going to play knight takes f7, attacking both the opponent's queen and this rook on h8. And now, I mean, king takes f7 is more or less forced, in which case we can now take that pawn with check. And again, we have a very exciting king hunt, checking the opponent's king. And the king does have some options here, but against moves like king f6 and king g6, I mean, this king is simply too exposed. And against king f8, we can play queen f3 with check, followed by queen h5. And bishop a3 check ideas. King f8 isn't the best option. It actually turns out that king e8 is the best move. But even now, we simply play bishop a3. Again, a common idea, except now we're not bringing our bishop to g5, but a3. We're currently attacking this bishop on e7 with both our bishop and our rook, and this bishop on d5 is attacking its only minor piece defender. Here, white is clearly winning this game. So guys, that covers the move d takes c3, which does seem very tempting, but again, this is a big mistake for black because we can play rook e1 with check, followed by the key move knight g5, with the idea of after castling kingside, we can play queen h5, or against d5, we can play knight takes f7, really opening up the position and aggressively going after our opponent's king. So black shouldn't take the pawn. I think the best move is probably d5, attacking our light squared bishop, in which now we can play bishop b5, pinning the opponent's knight. And yet again, we are tempting black to take our pawn on c3, and we'll go over that in a moment. But first, covering the move bishop e7, which is by far black's best option, we can now play rook e1, and following castling kingside, take that pawn on d4, continue with a move like c3, bishop f4, and I do think that white has a playable position. I'm not going to sit here and say that white is better. In fact, I think this is probably black's best variation, and I would actually take black in this position. But again, guys, it's a gambit. You guys saw how dangerous this opening can be, and if the very best variation for black is us being only down a pawn with a very active bishop pair, a knight on f3 ready to jump into e5 in the case of queen d3 being played, on top of the fact that we have an active rook on e1, an active rook soon on b1. I mean, if this is the worst that can happen, I think we'll take our chances. So guys, we just covered the move bishop e7, simply trying to get that king out of the center of the board. But what happens again if black gets tempted and takes that pawn on c3? I mean, in this position, it seems even more tempting to take that pawn. But now we can simply play knight d4, both attacking that knight on c6 with two of our minor pieces. And against a move like queen d6, we can play rook e1 with check, and after bishop e7, take that knight. The whole idea here is that after b takes c6, we can continue with the key idea of bishop a3. I mean, just piercing down on the opponent's queen, and if queen takes a3 is played, which is really more or less forced, we now take that pawn on c6. We are about to win the rook, even out the material. We have a huge edge in development, coordination of the pieces, and attacking chances. White is clearly better in this game. If you'd like to learn more on the theory behind the Scotch Gambit, click the video to the left. If you'd like to learn more about the Budapest Gambit, click the video to the right. Leave a comment to let me know what other videos you'd like to see covered on this channel. And as always, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Peace.